Good morning, students. In today's English class, we are going to take up the second chapter of literature, that is the Master Artist. Now, before we start reading, I hope you might have seen the video of this chapter and you might have enjoyed watching it. And after watching, you might have got some idea about the story, what the story is about. So, you know that there is a person, a French master artist, whose name is Monsieur Sinlabe. And he is called by an Italian rich man whose name is Giuliano Bartoli, and he calls him to paint a portrait of his. But Monsieur Sinyabe disagrees. He refuses. By saying that he has decided to retire. But when he sees disappointment on Giuliano Bartoli's face, he agrees. But he puts some terms and conditions for painting. So, what are those terms and conditions, and is he actually able to paint and make the portrait? Is he successful? What is the result? We are going to find out after reading the chapter. So, I assume that you have your book open with the chapter, page 9, the Master Artist, and you have some pencil in your hands to write down the meanings. So, before we begin, if you have the book open on the first page of the chapter, you can see on the left hand side at the bottom the pronunciation of some words is given. Actually, in this chapter, there are French and Italian names, and they've got a different kind of pronunciation. So we are going to practice that before we start reading the chapter. Now, can you see on the top of the page, the first word, number 1 with 1 star, no? And then with 2 stars. So let us learn how to pronounce these words. So the first word is to be pronounced like this, Monsieur. Monsieur, you can say again, yes, Monsieur. And the second part of the word is Sinailabe. 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 And then the third word is Giuliano. And the last one which is given is Signor. Signor. So as we come across these words, we learn to pronounce them again, bit difficult to pronounce. Okay, so let us start with the reading of the chapter. Monsieur Sinyabe had been a master artist of his day. Had been a master artist of his day means during those days he was a very well known and a very famous artist during his time, and in 1392 was ready to retire. So he was ready to retire, give up his profession because he had grown old maybe, when in the month of May, Giuliano Bartoli, a rich Italian patron, sent for him. So, a rich Italian patron. Now, patron is a person who supports the artists by giving them lot of money. So he was a rich Italian patron, Giuliano Bartoli. He sent for him. Sent for him means he called him. On his arrival, Bartoli said, "I'd like a portrait of myself on the wall of my dining hall, where everyone can see it." So he told him that he wanted a portrait of himself on this wall of his dining room where everyone could see it. And he asked him, "Could you paint it?" The wall is 20 feet tall, and he also told him that this wall is 20 feet tall. That means it's very, very big, and the portrait had to be very big. So he asked him that would he be able to paint it. Second paragraph. Monsieur l'Abbé looked thoughtful for a moment. So he thought for a moment and then shook his head. So he just shook his head in refusal. "I'm sorry, but I don't think so." So he just said that he was sorry. He don't think so that he would be able to paint it. "I am ready to retire, so I'm not available for hire." So he said that I've already decided to retire, so now I'm no longer available for hire. You cannot hire me. Hire, you understand, to take somebody on rent or some thing on rent. However, seeing the disappointment in Signor Bartoli's eyes, he continued. But then he saw that Signor Bartoli, now Signor is a word, Italian word for Mr. Like in English we say Mr. So Signor is an Italian word for Mr. And same way, Monsieur is a French word for Mr. So he saw disappointment in Bartoli's eyes, and then he continued, "Well, there's a possibility if you think you can allow me to use my abilities to the fullest." And then he says, "Okay, there is one chance, there is one possibility that if I may think of painting your portrait, and that one condition is that you would let me use my abilities to the fullest." Then he says that if you would allow me to paint the way I want to, or if you would let me use my abilities to the fullest, to the maximum, then I may think of. If you let me find out how far I can go as an artist. And he says, he further adds that if you would let me paint my own way and let me find out how far can I go as an artist, how much can I achieve as an artist actually. So then I can think of, not for money, mind you, but for food and a bed instead. He says, I'll not be painting to get money from you, but just for food in a day and a place to rest. A bed instead means a place to rest. You need not even pose. And he says that you won't have to pose even. Whenever you get your portrait painted, you have to sit in front of the artist for long, long hours, sometimes even days, because artist sees and paints, no? So he says, you will not have to sit in front of me. You'll not have to pose in front of me, because my memory is excellent. He says, my memory is very sharp. Already I can see your portrait in my mind. He says, I can imagine, I can see your portrait in my mind. But I insist. So insist, he says, I demand forcefully. He says, but I insist, Signor Bartoli, that while I work, your portrait must remain hidden, even from you. Now, this is the second condition which he puts. He says, while I'll be painting, my second condition is that your portrait must be hidden from anyone and from everyone, even from you. So these are the two conditions he puts in front of him. First is that Bartoli would let him paint according to his ways, according to his whims and fancies. And his second condition is that till the portrait is complete, nobody would see it. Even Bartoli could not see it. So Let us see whether Bartoli agrees to his terms or conditions. So we come to the third paragraph now. How strange, thought the patron. But he also thought about how highly the artist had been recommended. So he found these terms and conditions very, very strange. But then he thought that this was a highly recommended artist. He was a very famous, many people had recommended his name for his portrait. So then he agreed. He says, "Oh, of course," he said, "anything you wish. But I insist at least upon paying you something for your effort." So he says, "Okay, I agree to whatever you say, but I also insist, I also want that you will let me pay you something at least. Let's draw up a contract." So then they decide, so let us draw up a contract. That means let us decide the terms and conditions. So then the artist is set to paint. So we move on to the fourth paragraph. Now a glint came to Monsieur l'Abbe's eyes. So a sort of shine came into his eyes, came into the eyes of the artist, Monsieur l'Abbe's eyes, as he gazed upon the 20-foot tall wall. So as he looked at the wall, as he gazed at the wall, so a sort of shine came to his eyes. Now, why was this shine there in his eyes? Because he would be getting to paint a big portrait according to his own wishes. And nobody would interfere in that. He's going to give his imagination wings. Whatever he liked, he would be free to paint. So that is why there was a shine in his eyes. He was happy, and thought of all that space, such a wonderful space to give his imagination wings. So he thought of such a big place, a space he would get to give imagination wings to his imagination. Because unknown to Signor Bartoli, or indeed anyone else, for all of his career of 45 years, Monsieur l'Abbe had longed to paint in his own way. Now he thinks of one thing and he says, actually, he's thinking that nobody knew till now, not even Bartoli, and neither Bartoli nor anyone else knew that all through his career of 45 long years, he had longed, he had wished badly to paint in his own way, in his own style, but he was not given this freedom. He had not got a chance to paint according to his own way or according to his own imagination. And what was the reason for that? And why? What way was that? Certainly not the popular styles of the time, because his imagination, his way of painting did not match with the ways which were popular that time. So he had a different style of painting, actually, totally different style, which was not at all famous, because that time people they demanded something else, some different style of painting was more famous, and he had given up his own ways because he had to earn money, he had to become famous. So and what way was that? Certainly not the popular styles of the time. No, Monsieur Sinlaibe had hungered to break free of restraints. So, all his life as a painter, he had longed to break free of the restraints, of the limits. People had put limits, the things which were famous, they had put limits on his imagination. So, all his life of his painting career, he had hungered, he had wished to break free of those limits, of those restraints. But the guild, his craft, and livelihood would never have allowed it. Just because of these reasons, the guild is an organization of the artists. Those people, his craft, though his livelihood, because he had to earn money, all these things, they had limited his imagination, and he never took a chance to paint in his own ways. So this is for the first time in his life he was getting a chance, and he was getting the freedom to paint in his own way. So he was very happy for that. So he followed their rules, although he was never proud of it. So all his life, when he had become a very famous painter, he had followed the rules of the organization, and he had become famous doing that. But he was never proud of himself. He was never proud of the work which he produced. Of course, he didn't reveal this to Signor Bartoli. So, but he did not tell this to Signor Bartoli, So that would have given the truth away. So reveal means to show or tell. Signing the contract, they sealed the agreement. So they they drew up a contract, the rules and regulations, and then they stamped it. They sealed the agreement that now nobody could break away from that contract. Immediately, the master artist threw a high curtain in front of the wall. So the first thing which he did was he threw a big curtain in front of the wall. Now, what could be the reason of that? Yes, his second condition. Because he had laid a condition that till his portrait was complete, nobody should have a look at it. Nobody could see it. So, for that, he put up a curtain, a thick one, a very big one, so that nobody could even peep through it. A high curtain in front of the wall, a curtain through which Signor Bartoli could not see at all. So that was a very thick curtain, even Signor Bartoli could not see through it. He tried to peek, but Monsieur l'Abbé insisted on total privacy for his artistic techniques. So, whenever Bartoli he tried to peep through the curtain, Monsieur l'Abbé would always insist, would always demand that he wanted privacy for his artistic techniques. Techniques can be ways of painting. A week passed, so this way 1 week went by. How is it coming along? Asked the hopeful Signor Bartoli. So after a week was over, Signor Bartoli, he was very eager to know how his portrait was going on. So he just asked him, how is it coming along? And so we finish this class here today, and I just want you to go through these 2 pages once again and learn how to pronounce these difficult words which we came across. Thank you. Good morning, students. In our today's English session, we are going to take up the literature chapter 2, the part which was left of literature chapter 2. So I hope you have your books, literature books with chapter 2 opened on page 11. You remember the name of the chapter? That was The Master Artist. And before we start the reading today, let us have a quick recap of the story which we had done that day. If you remember, there was a French artist. What was the name? Yes, Monsieur Senai Labe. Yes, now you have learned how to pronounce, I hope. So, Monsieur Senai Labe, who was a French artist and he was very famous artist of his time, he had decided to retire after a long career of 45 years. And all through his career he had been a very famous artist, But he wasn't happy with his works because all through his life he had painted according to the demands of the people, according to the works which were liked. So that was not his way of painting. Actually, his way of painting was very different from what was famous those days. So he was never proud of his work and he had never got a chance or an opportunity to paint according to his ways. So when an Italian patron, what was the name? Giuliano Bartoli. So when he called Monsieur l'Abbé and asked him to paint a portrait of his, he thought it was a good opportunity to paint according to his ways. So firstly he refused, he denied. But then when he saw his disappointed face, so he said that he could take that chance to paint his portrait if he put two conditions. The first was that if Giuliano would let him paint according to his own ways, according to his abilities. And the second condition was that till the portrait was complete, it would remain hidden. Nobody would be able to see that, not even Giuliano. And then Giuliano, he agreed to both these conditions, and then they they drew up the conditions of the contract, and Monsieur, he started painting on the 20 feet wall of the dining room. And in order to hide his work, what did he do? He put a big, thick curtain in front of the wall so that nobody could see. So Giuliano was very eager to know how his work was going. So when the week passed, he asked him that how the painting was coming along. So this we had read till here. So now we come on to page 11 and we'll start the reading. So I start from the top. Answering him from behind the curtain. So when Bartoli asked Musso that how was the painting coming along, so he answered him from behind the curtain. Monsieur l'Abbé said, "It's coming quite well." So he says that it is coming quite well. The work is getting done in a nice manner. You know, at the age of 8, I was apprentice to the great Ambrosio Lorenzetti. So he told him that he had been a learner, a student, a follower. Apprentice means when a person who works for somebody to learn the skills from him. So he says at the age of 8, I was an apprentice to the great Ambrosio Lorenzetti. So Ambrosio Lorenzetti, he was a very famous Italian painter too. So I could never dishonor his name. So now he is giving the explanation that I have learned from such a big, famous painter. So I cannot never dishonor his name. I cannot bring shame to his name. So I have to do my work very nicely, very properly. He taught me the art of grinding pigment, laying plaster, sometimes slowly, sometimes faster. So he says that I learned how to make the color from him, how to put the plaster on the wall, sometimes slowly, sometimes faster. He taught me how to draw and most importantly, not to hurry. So he further tells that Ambrosio, he taught him how to draw the drawings, and most importantly he learned from him that he while painting we should not hurry. Signor Bartoli, a masterpiece takes a while at least. So he tells that Signor, the masterpiece takes a lot of time to complete. Reluctantly, Signor Bartoli withdrew. So hesitantly, he did not want to go away from there, but Senor, because he had signed up the contracts, he had agreed to his wishes, so he withdrew, he went away from there. Withdrew means went away from there. A month passed. How is it coming along? Signor Bartoli asked. So, again, after a month, he put the same question from him that how is the painting coming along? It's coming quite nicely, said Monsieur l'Abbe, again from behind the curtain. So again he gave the same answer that it's coming quite well. Along with his words came the strange sounds of swooshing, clanking, and slapping. Now, this time, along with his answer, Signor, he heard very strange sounds of swooshing, of clanking, and of slapping. Now, you know what is slapping when we slap on the face. And what is clanking? It's a loud sound of metal. You know, when metal pieces they strike against each other like coins, they clank. So, that sound is called as clanking. And what is swooshing? When you move with a lot of, when you rush past something, you know, cars, when they swoosh along, they rush past fast. So that is called as swooshing. So Signor, he heard these sounds and he felt very, very strange. You know, you are fortunate that I am painting your portrait. So again, Museo says that you are lucky. Fortunate means lucky. You are fortunate that I am painting your portrait. Only bone fresco will need 4 coats of lime plaster. Now he gives an example of a very famous fresco, that is Buon fresco. He says only that fresco needed 4 coats. 4 times they had to be coated of lime plaster. Now what is a fresco? You know, it's a special kind of painting which is done on the ceiling or on the wall. It is done along with the plaster only. When the plaster is wet, the painting is done that time only. So the painting becomes affixed to that plaster and it lasts forever. So he says, you are lucky that I'm painting your portrait. Only bone frescoes, they need 4 coats of plaster. And it's the best plaster process I ever saw. So he's explaining his method. He says that's the best method to plaster. Signor Bartoli, it will last forever. So he further adds that your portrait, it will last forever. It will never fade away. But it's a time consuming endeavor. So he says, again he gives the explanation, but it takes a lot of time. It's a time consuming endeavor. Endeavor means an activity in which one is involved. Sighing deeply, the patron withdrew again. So, Signor, he took a deep breath. He did not want to go away now. He had no patience left. He wanted to see his painting. So, again, he went back. Just how long would this take? And he was thinking how long it would take. Another 3-4 months passed, and finally half a year went by. So after that, 1 month, 2, 3, 4, and finally 6 months went by. One day, Signor Bartoli marched in, demanding to see his portrait. So this was his limit now. He could not hold himself anymore. So he just came in and he demanded that I want to see my portrait now. You must be finished by now, and today I will see it. So he was very, very certain. Look at the words. I will see it, he says. So he says, you must be finished by now, and I want to see it now. He exclaimed, shaking with frustration. He was so angry that time. His voice showed, and he was shaking, literally trembling with frustration because he had finished with all the patience. Stepping out from behind the cloth, as though surprised by such anger. So Signor sorry, not Senor, Monsieur l'Abbé, he stepped out of the curtain. As he was very surprised by such an anger, he did not expect Senor to behave in such manner. So he came out. Monsieur l'Abbé said calmly, so he was very calm and he said, "That's fine. You needed only to request it." So he says, "It's okay. You could have requested it. I would have shown it to you. See." And he pulled aside the 20-foot tall curtain, and he pulled the curtain aside. Giuliano Bartoli stood for a minute. Now, for a minute, he was frozen. He stood there for a minute. He did not show any response. Then his mouth fell open. When is our mouth wide open? Either we are very happy or we are very shocked. So let us see what happens to him. So his mouth fell open, his eyes turned red, and he grabbed what few hairs he had left on his head, and he showed his anger. His mouth was open wide, his eyes they turned red with rage, and he grabbed his few hairs which were left on his head. He did a little hop, he jumped a little, and then a twitch. So he twitched, like a brief sudden movement that showed his anger. And his eyebrows twisted as though he was under a spell. So he made strange faces, expressions with the twisted eyebrows, as though he was under a spell. Somebody had put some magic on him, so he was behaving like that. Under a spell means as though he was under some magic. Giuliano Bartoli obviously did not like his portrait. So all his expressions showed that he did not like his portrait at all, not a bit. So it was obviously means sure. It was sure that he did not like his portrait. Giuliano Bartoli was enraged. He was very, very angry, furious. How absurd, how disgusting. So this was his first exclamation. He said, "How absurd, ridiculous," he says. "How disgusting. What does this mean?" He could not understand the portrait at all, the expression of the portrait. "You will not receive any money." And he was so angry that he says, "You'll not get any money. Do you hear? None. You are not an artist. Maybe a thief or a madman." So he says, "You're not an artist at all. You're a thief or a madman. Look, get out of my sight. You leave my house tonight or I'll have you thrown out." So he says, either you get out of my house tonight itself or I will throw you out of my house. So, what had Monsieur l'Abbé drawn that was so wrong? Now, Monsieur was thinking that what had he drawn was that so wrong, that why was Bartoli so angry? He couldn't see it, so when he looked at his painting, he could not see anything wrong with it. He had fussed and fixed for so long. So fast and fixed means he had thought over it and he has worked on it before finalizing everything. So that means he had given enough time to his work and he could not find any mistake in his portrait. So he was a bit surprised why Bartoli did not like it. It was his 20-foot tall masterpiece, and to him it was still appearing to him as his masterpiece, which was 20 feet tall. He wasn't sorry that he had drawn to his heart's content, and he was happy with what he had done. He was not at all feeling sorry for what he had done. Rather, he was happy because he had drawn to his heart's content. Content means satisfaction. Now his heart was totally satisfied because all through his life he had painting according to the demands of the people, according to the demands that were famous. But he had never got a chance to pay it according to his wishes. And this was his first time that he had got, and he had painted to his heart's content. So he was very happy with it, no matter what anybody could say, and he wasn't bothered at all what Bartoli or anybody would say about his work. Perhaps his patron could not tolerate his cubist expression. Now he's thinking maybe, perhaps means maybe, his patron, that means Giuliano, he could not tolerate, he could not accept his cubist expression. Now he had painted in a typical manner that is called as cubism or cubist expression. That is a form of a modern art. It's a form of a modern art in which people use geometric shapes to bring out the figures, and they are not exactly human like, but they are geometric figures, and that was made famous by Pablo Picasso, which came about 500 years later than this time when the story was written. So he says maybe Giuliano, he could not understand, he could not accept his cubist expression, but Pablo Picasso would have been proud of him. And then he says Pablo would have been proud of him. If truth be told, Monsieur l'Abbe wasn't crazy. So the writer now says that if we talk about the truth, Monsieur l'Abbe, he wasn't crazy, he wasn't a madman, not at all. He had simply been born 500 years too early. And the writer gives the reason. The only reason is that he was born 500 years too early. Because if he would have been born 500 years later, when Pablo Picasso made this cubist expression famous, then his works would have been appreciated. So this is how we complete the story. I hope you've understood, and it was a nice one story. And now I want you to go through this part of the chapter again, and then you can try A part questions understanding the text, and B part you can try to find out their answers. You can mark them in the book itself, or you can write down in the rough notebooks, and then next week we will discuss them. I hope you are fine. Do study, do read the chapters. Bye for now.